Good morning, colleagues. It's 10 o'clock, so it's kick-off time. And warm welcome to everybody to this Public Board meeting. That's my subtle way of reminding you of Public Board. As well as I'm about to welcome our visitors here, we've got a couple of people online, but as is now the custom, quite a few people then access the YouTube version of it. So remember, back before the turn of the year, it may have been at least three-figure numbers that you were you could guarantee were watching. Attendance figures have dropped a bit. Viewing figures have dropped a little bit. So maybe we need to inject some real excitement into this meeting. I'm going to give some thought to that with Laura and Bijou in due course. Welcome, in particular, Jane Duffin. It's Jane's first visit as CQC. What's your title, Jane?
I'm the Provider Oversight Lead, so we used to be called Relationship Owners. So the title's changed, but the duty hasn't.
Okay, you're providing she's our key link.
I'm the link, the CQC link for this trust.
Fine, and this is my moment to remind people to use the microphones so that the people online elsewhere can pick it up. We've also got a couple of international observers. Really nice to have Fiona and Victor here. I had the pleasure of meeting them just earlier on, and then there's some other visitors online. The only other thing I want to say at the beginning is just to embarrass Bijou once again. We're not going to be self-congratulatory this morning, but this isn't self-congratulatory about the trust, but I can't ignore the fact that Health Service Journal discovered that the top Chief Executive of Foundation Trusts in the country is Bijou Bartoli. So I'd quite like us to record at least our congratulations to Bijou for that. He's going to really hate me for having done that. Okay, we're good to go. We've got a pretty full agenda this morning. And for those of you that are also in private board and in board development, I'm going to just do a little bit of juggling just to make sure that we have enough space and time to cover the items. We might have to squeeze board development to make sure that we have the time to give enough attention to some of the key issues. Can I check first of all any apologies for absence? Katie Stevens, yes, okay. Any declarations of interest beyond the normal? Okay, and can I check then whether people are going to surprise me with any matters of any other business? No, so we can plan accordingly. For the purposes of the observers as well, my normal reminder, which is almost all of the papers here have already received significant scrutiny in our various committee structures working their way through. So if it feels like we're not inviting lots of repetition, it's because repetition doesn't do us any good, and we're wanting to focus in on the big strategic issues within this meeting. So thanks for that. Let's go straight in. The board minutes from 26th of March, normal high quality. Are we happy to approve the minutes? Yeah. And the action log, it's very satisfying action log, isn't it? Let's just fetch it up. Yeah, how about that? That's just as it should be. So let's go straight into the Chief Exec's update.
Thank you, Paul. You will have seen in your packs already the Chief Exec dashboard. This is for month 1, April. Strong financial performance like we would expect, particularly at this time of year, and some really good, I was going to say, operational performance metrics. So both in terms of our 28-day fast diagnosis and our 6-week diagnostic wait. The cancer 62-day cancer metric is provisional still, so we suspect that will still move positively. And we have, if we look back at the back end of March, remember we delivered that at 85%. So that one where we're thinking of progressing that closer and closer to the constitutional standard is a real positive. Probably worth noting on all of these metrics, the way we highlight them is against constitutional standard rather than national standard. We're meeting all of the national standards. But I think we've shared here before, we strongly believe in delivery of the constitutional standards, which we were doing prior to COVID, so back in 2019, and we are very keen to make sure that we try and deliver that on time. RTT is slightly behind plan. We had hoped that that would have been nearer the 83% mark. It's at 82, so there's a bit of a remedial action plan that's in place to try and come back against that performance. A couple of other quick things to mention. We thought that we would have heard about our Advanced Foundation Trust status by now. Myself and Chris were on a call with NHS England earlier this week. We envisage now that might get pushed to either next week or the first week of June. I think the Secretary of State changes has obviously pushed back some of those timelines a little bit for us. And we should also have next month our quarter 4 position in terms of our NOF segmentation. We envisage remaining in segment 1, but obviously we'll need that to be confirmed early next month.
Good, okay, thank you for that. But looking at it, a lot of positive news in there, but there are still a couple of red buttons which have been looked at within finance and performance. How confident are you that particularly the 18 weeks referral to treatment will get properly on track with that plan?
I think it would be fair to say it's a challenge. Our aim and ambition is to hit the 92% standard by March 2027. That's probably been one of the most ambitious improvement trajectories put in by any organisation. And it's a number of issues that will compound that. So there is the obvious just capacity in terms of trying to move patients through their pathway. There is also a financial element on that in terms of ability to fund that work that we will just need to be mindful of from our commissioning colleagues. We envisage that we would be able to negotiate that with them nearer the time. So I think it is challenging. The team, I think, are very much committed to try and meet that standard. We know we've been there before. We'd like to be there again. The 52 weeks, which was one of the other stretching ambitions, I think is now being met pretty much every month in terms of 52-week wait. So we know we've been able to hit some of these stretching targets before, and we're keen to do that. And alongside all of that, in terms of it not just being percentage performance, but we want to make sure that our patients who are waiting are well informed and know where they are in their wait, which is another key element that we will be playing into our planning.
Good, thank you for that. Phil.
Thanks, Paul. Just to mention, you alluded to the fact that we discussed a number of aspects of this app fit, which we did. I think just one to pull out is that we've requested a deeper dive into the outpatient transformation work, because we obviously saw a significant improvement in gastroenterology, which we were then going to roll out, and we are rolling out to other specialties. And I think we just want some oversight of how that is doing, maybe some of what the obstacles are, because it still will form the biggest part of the list.
You will have seen through the staff roadshows, we have launched 2 big trust-wide improvement projects, one of which is the outpatient one, and the other one is very much based on our discharge processes. So that will be something that's got executive senior leadership. It won't be something that will be fixed in 1 year. We see them, because of the nature of the projects themselves and the fact that they are trust-wide. This, I suspect, will run for a couple of years, but that's not to take away the pace that will be behind them. It's more around some of the complexity, the embedding in the scale of the change that's needed.
Any other questions and challenges to Bijou at this point on the Chief Exec's dashboard? Then, noting that there's still progress to be made in some areas, but particularly RTT, and noting that we're keeping a close eye on outpatients, so I think we're receiving that report. Let's move on to the Chair Chief Executive Engagement Update. This is a report we share. Bijou, do you want to kick off?
Yeah. Thank you. So just a couple of things really to note. Most of the activity on here is the things that you will have seen before, particularly with regards to engagement with local authority colleagues, other providers through the Provider Leadership Board and ICB colleagues. The Trust is involved in a number of national initiatives, particularly with regards to the elective care programme and the urgent emergency care programme, which is great in terms of the influence that the Trust can provide. The
Other element just to be mindful of is that we have had quite a lot of engagement with primary care as part of our development of both the IHO and or neighbourhood working. That work is really progressing. It's been over the year, we've shared here previously the amount of engagement that we've done over the year. And I think it's coming to a point where a lot of the things that we have lined up, particularly about where we want our phasing of the IHO to go, will come to fruition. We'll be discussing, I think, a bit more of that in board development.
Good, thank you. And the only thing I would want to highlight is the fairly long list of issues picked up through governors. I'm not intending to take us through them, but more to give assurance to the board that they're all being addressed in one way or another, which is my way of emphasising that as we move towards preparation for the era after the NHS bill completes its process and becomes the NHS Act, where we need to get a replacement to our governing body. I think this report gives a good example of where we are getting benefits from our governors, providing the kind of viewpoint into the public that we might not otherwise be getting. Ross and colleagues are well in track on developing options for us to look at later on in the year as to how we would wish to provide a model public engagement and wider patient engagement process at the point when the new legislation, assuming it's unamended, comes into force. And that's all I wanted to highlight. Happy to take any questions or comments on the report to us both. Happy to receive, and then let's go into some of the core business. And thank you. We're joined here by Elliot and Nikki to give us an update on emergency surgery and elective care. Over to you.
Thank you. So, summary of the dashboard. We have recruited a significant number of consultants in the last 2 months. Bit of feedback on the recruitment process. We've changed the competency framework, and I think we've made some really strong additions there, and it's worked really well. Ongoing work streams in the Alliance and the bilateral board, currently in OMFS and plastics, and urology and breast are coming up next. Continuing to develop the outpatient transformation work, working into 4 work streams around waste, shop floor, single point of access, and reducing low value contacts. We've got a significant amount of work going on from an estate point of view. The theatre redesign at NSEC is progressing really well in terms of clinical engagement in detail, and the North Tyneside Theatre estate plan is starting to take shape, and that's really important for us in terms of business continuity, but also could carry some significant risks in terms of elective plan, depending on the estate plan that we're allowed to develop with it. We had a really good strategy session with the business unit yesterday, which encompassed winter planning and learning from last winter, current bed state, occupancy levels, flow, and also clinical strategy. So the winter plan continues to develop. But we had some really good discussions about potentially moving big components of clinical work out of the NSEC site onto the base sites, which I think will both help decompress the NSEC site, but also provide significantly enhanced clinical models for our patients.
And kind of left shift.
Start off, yeah.
Yeah.
And we have now about to complete the second perfect week in theatres. Analysis of the first week has shown that we did 30% extra work, which is great, but we'll analyse the second week at Wansbeck. And as part of that analysis, we'll want to understand which parts we want to embed permanently in terms of clinical and operational practice. From a patient and staff experience perspective, you'll see we've been nominated for a number of awards. We continue to work through the National Staff Survey results, and we continue to deliver positive care in a number of areas. From a safety and quality perspective, I guess that maps to a number of services. From a maternity point of view, we continue to do the culture improvement work. I think things are improving, and I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think we're heading in the right direction where the service may be able to lead itself from a clinical ownership perspective. Urology surveillance, which we've reported at various committees before, is improving and has reduced from 2,000 to 1,500 patients. And we're now at a stage where we're engaging with digital from a RPA perspective, ideally getting to the point of automation, which I think will be really good for our patients. We're looking at a piece of work related to PASLink and single point of access, which has thrown up a clinical risk, which we're working to resolve. And then plastics is a service which we're working on in terms of a number of its component parts in terms of improvement work. The strategy and planning component, I won't go through in detail. Suffice to say, we continue to work through a number of planning cycles, and the session I talked about yesterday was important in terms of starting to tie all of those together. From a performance point of view, in national terms, we're performing well, but I think we have to say that we're still stuck in that sort of 82% mark. So we've got 4 problem services in terms of TNO, gynecology, plastics and oral surgery. I think we have plans for a number of those services, but it's hard work and we're not getting the incremental change that we would want in terms of continuing to improve from an 18 weeks perspective. We've spoken to Royal Berkshire again recently. I think the striking thing is they have a bespoke IT service for all of this. I'm not saying that's the solution here, but that's the one thing that I think is different there compared to us. Cancer, we have challenges within oral surgery and urology, and outpatient virtual remains strong. From a workforce perspective, we had dipped right down to 4.41% from a sickness point of view, so really good progress. It's bumped back up, so we're clearly working hard on that in terms of restoring the trajectory again. It's very unusual for us to be below 85% from an appraisal point of view. So again, we're working hard to get that back above the level, and everything else is good from that perspective. Finances are a big risk from our perspective. I actually think that amber rating is incorrect and it should be a red. But to break that down, we have a 7 million deficit from a CIP underachievement perspective. That's a 50-50 split over 25-26 and 24-25 financial years. And in the non-pay bit, again, we have a 3 million overspend from a theatres perspective. And we are, just to flag, we're hitting massive problems with supply chain issues. And what we're finding is when we're having to switch, there's a sort of inflationary increase and significant increases on that at times. And I suspect that's something that's not going to go away. And if anything, there's a risk that it may get worse. And then finally, to finish on ERF, it's not green, but I would like to emphasize that that has been delivered for most of the year with a whole surgical site in theatre terms out of action, which I think I feel is a real achievement.
Just reminded, Public Board, ERF?
Elective Recovery Fund.
Thank you. Yeah. That's great. Nikki, anything you want to add before we open up?
No, I think just to add, the teams are working extremely hard on, particularly on performance, but also there's problem services that Elliot's mentioned. There's a lot of work going on with those in terms of action plans to make sure that we've got everything in place that we need and engagement with the clinical leads.
Very good. Then let's open it up for comments and questions. Phil.
Yeah, just on the non-pay variant. So it's slightly unusual because not normally it's about pay that we are talking about in terms of variances. You mentioned theatres as being a large component of that. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and whether there's anything else of significance in that non-pay?
So we've had 32 very nationally and internationally significant events in terms of the cement and the striker incidents in terms of major supply chain problems. But we've had to put meetings in weekly now to manage sudden unexpected loss of supply chains on key components of the surgical pathways, and that's a battle we're fighting on a weekly basis. And then as we're switching to a different product, there's a natural increase in the prices.
So do I understand it? The key reason for the change has been we've had to spend more on compensating, mitigating the impact. Yeah. Has there been a safety impact?
No, we've measured that. I mean, they have swapped out products, but that's been done in quality assessments being done, safety assessments. So we have also trained some staff up in other products, so that actually if we do need to switch, they have been trained.
That's still a big variance, isn't it? 13 million, 12.5 million.
And some of that's underachieved CIP as well. So it's not all the consumers.
Phil, do you want to come back on that for you?
That's helpful just to get a feel for it. Although
within the non-paid budget will be negative, in effect negative reserves to reflect historic underachievement of CIP and vacancy factor and things like that. So it's not necessarily all related to non-pay. And in the new financial year, we've sort of refined that, so it's a lot clearer across the various pay, non-pay headings, etc. So it's certainly for surgery, it's a bit more better aligned than it possibly was historically. And we have eradicated historic CIP performance in this budget round.
Thank you, that's helpful, Margaret. And then I've got Jeremy.
Just sticking with the inflationary issues, I'm assuming that's right across England. It isn't just our trust with the changes for supply.
Yeah, the supply chain was interrupted internationally and affected everybody.
And then another question around obs and gynaes culture. We've done quite a lot of work, you guys have. I was just wondering if you wanted to give an update where we're at, particularly with the resident doctors, because we did have a few issues and things have really progressed, haven't they?
So we've done a lot of work around that. The weekly feedback is positive, and positive in terms of improvement. And we had a meeting with the regional TPD off the back of training program director, and that followed a key meeting at a regional level, which had looked at our response and the improvements as a consequence. And they were very complimentary about the approach from the outset, what we'd achieved, and as a consequence said that training allocation could be maintained.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it was a comment and a question. So the comment really is we are in a little bit of a cleft stick in terms of the procurement processes, because the more we buy in bulk and align our products, which is great for training, it's great for efficiency, it does give it, there's an inherent threat when the market changes, and it was very, very unfortunate. And of course, the medical devices market is an extremely expensive place to be in at the moment. A lot of the prostheses that we're talking about are just very high cost, high value items. The second bit, I just wondered if you might wish to expand on which bit of IT the Royal Berkshire.
Yes, and I will be inviting Dave to comment in a moment.
The bespoke IT bit, I didn't know whether it was in and around the booking.
Yeah, I spoke to their team, and certainly they've developed over a number of years a bespoke IT digital system, which is real-time live. Now, obviously, we've developed something in terms of our and more up-to-date real-time, but I think there are things which they do which have got local agreements, which we probably need to look at. But they've spent many years, I think, developing this and perfecting it.
Thanks. Dave, any reflections on that?
I think let's just get the requirements together and have a look what it looks like. I don't think we'd be adverse to helping do something along those lines, or have a look at what it means.
The bit I would just caution against that the IT is one part, and the development that's been made was done with a team in terms of what would help them. I think we need to make sure that it's not just the IT, it's some of the actions that go underneath that, because it's a bit like we can, I don't want to say keep blaming the IT issues, but actually if we're not doing some of the things, that actions that we need to do, then there's no point. And we already track how many people access the tool that we've designed and put in place. We know that the take-up of that is still needing to grow further. So I think we can do it, but just be mindful of there's a whole host of other things we need to do alongside.
That's a very good caution. Paul.
Just wanted to cover off the comments on inflation. So the inflation settlement for the NHS in terms of our contract this year was a gross 2%, and that was and then netted off with an efficiency assumption of 2%. So in effect, there was no additional inflation funding provided this year. It will be varied a bit because of the new national pay award. That'll impact pay, not non-pay. So it is going to be an issue we're going to have to deal with in year. Heard issues around surgery, but obviously the impact of the conflict in the Middle East will probably come through inflation, but we're going to have to manage that. The reassuring thing is that at month one, we managed that because we delivered our surplus, but we're going to have to keep a close eye on it during.
Okay, let's not lose that knowledge. I've got Maria first and then Kate. Maria.
Thank you, Chair. I know with the supplies issues, there were good comms going out to patients that were waiting for surgery. I just wondered if you had any feedback from patients that were impacted, how it landed with them, how it felt from an experience point of view to provide some assurance.
We did communicate with patients. We had very little negative feedback, and actually we only in the end cancelled one patient, which was in the first couple of days that the impact of the cement occurred. Since then, we've managed all of the patients appropriately. So actually, we've communicated with them well, but feedback's been positive.
Thank you for that, Kate.
Thanks. Nikki, Elliot mentioned about the sharp rise in absences, 0.5% increase for April. Just wondered what plans are in place to ensure that doesn't continue to rise. I think that's an additional 20 odd people.
Yeah, so we've got it down, as you say, quite significantly. It's the lowest it's been for 20 years, I think, from a business unit point of view. So between myself and our senior HR advisor, we're meeting with the operational teams on a monthly basis. We're going through each case individually. We're escalating things through occupational health or other routes as necessary. There are a number of complex and significant health issues that some people have, which we're working through, and it's bringing those to a conclusion as well, which is the focus.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more? We've had a good discussion, particularly around the supply chain issues, where I think we've received assurance that despite the challenges that came up, there's been no evidence of patient harm, although there was one operation that was delayed. We've identified the financial implications of that, that's impacted on month one figures and are likely to continue to, and linked to that, the inflation settlement for the department, which will be not just relevant to emergency surgery and elective care, but more widely across the organisation. We've heard that there's more work to be done on IT, but with the careful advice from the chief executive that it's no good just hoping that IT will solve all your problems, but at the same time, let's try and learn from the people who are ahead of us on the performance chart, because we're not used to having too many people ahead of us. So let's make sure that we learn from the best in category, in best in class. And we've heard that one of the problems of doing so well with reducing staff absences is it's a hell of a challenge keeping that way. And I think we've had some assurance that we're doing our best to get back onto the record-breaking figures within the department. That's been a really good presentation. It's going to be the last one we get from Elliot on this topic, since he's got the new job of medical director at County Durham and Darlington. Warmest congratulations to you, Elliot.
Thank you.
It's going to be an enormous loss for us, but part of what you've managed to do effectively has been make sure that there is a tier of people that means that we will manage, we will find ways of managing as a consequence, but there's no doubt we're going to be innocent.
Thank you.
Does that cover the territory? Yeah, that's great. And thank you very much indeed, Elliot and Nikki. And we're straight in, Ross, to the comms report.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is our usual communications and engagement update. Dashboard, you can see again, I know some of this is seasonal, but it's back to where we'd expect it to be in a really positive place. Good rise in reputation and trust, and some really good media, social and digital coverage. Out in the community again, lots of strong engagement and working with Jo and her team as well to make sure we do capture that patient voice and community voice that you mentioned earlier. Been some big projects going on in the last quarter or so, and again, 3 or 4 things I'll mention. As I said, some of that is seasonal and would expect things to be not quite as good in the sort of teethers winter as they are in the rest of the time, but I think a lot of it doesn't just happen by accident. It's due to lots of hard work around the trust as well. So one thing we've been working really hard on is just delivering that pipeline of really positive stories. And you'll see from the report we had broadcast coverage in the BBC, as well as lots of local media coverage and things on social media as well. Another area we're really focusing on is trying to create our own opportunities, so we're not so heavily reliant on traditional media. We had Employee Appreciation Day on social media, which generated lots of interest and engagement. Another thing we're really conscious of is trying to target a younger demographic. And some of that feeds into the data from the British Society Attitudes Survey, which you can see on page 5, which identified a real gap between under 35s and then the rest of the population. So we've kind of really pivoted to video and focused a lot of our social media work in trying to capture people from a younger demographic. And that's partly important for having that audience ready for when we do need to communicate on those sort of issues, but equally in terms of employer brand and trying to get people interested in careers here. A lot of work this quarter is focused on staff engagement, and you'll all be well cited on our Northumbria Way work, which has come to a conclusion with the staff roadshows where we've talked. But that has been a really long-term project with lots of research, lots of testing, and lots of back and forth as well. Lastly, just to mention, and I have mentioned this at previous boards, we're really focusing a lot on meeting the public where they are instead of expecting them to come in and see us. So our Northumbria Cafe events are going from strength to strength. We've got another 4 in for this year, and that is where we actually go out to venues. And the last one was in Alnwick, and we'll meet people from the local community. And it's a kind of thematic approach, but it's almost to ask us anything, and we'll try and feed that back in. Last thing I'd mention as well, just a little bit about when we're talking about targeting younger people on page 3 of the report, and you can check this out online if you want to have nightmares, but we did a series of videos on TikTok and Instagram with our training dummies that they use for when people pass away. So they are quite frightening, but it's got 2 million views on Instagram and 650,000 on TikTok. So we've got a bit of coverage for going viral there, but it does take a bit of watching. So I'll leave it at that. Really strong quarter, but still lots to do as ever. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, and we're kind of demonstrating the new branding in this presentation as well, which I must say I like, and it's kind of good. This is simply for update, comments, chairs, questions, challenge. Steve?
Thanks, Ross. It's a really great presentation. I really value the work that you do in terms of engaging with both the voluntary sector and the public. Those World Cafe events are excellent. Just looking though at the big signals, working in partnership being one of them, I wonder, is there anything that you've got in mind that would help us capture sort of the sentiment of our partners and stakeholders? And I noticed on your what's next slide, there's something about AI and stakeholder comms. I don't know if they're connected, but I'd like you to just explain a little bit more, please.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. A really good and timely question. So in the same way that we do the public perception research with Explain, we do a stakeholder version as well, and that's the next one we're due to do. So that's an independent company who will go and speak to all our partners and stakeholders, ask a range of questions, and then we'll get some feedback from that. So we'll look at that. On the other side as well, we're also just having a review of how we communicate with our stakeholders, and Wayne and a few others in my team have been working on that to come up with a new plan and a bit of a new strategy around how we do that in maybe a bit more modern way. But we've got a lot of work to do on that, I think, in the next couple of months.
Alistair?
Again, it's really good, strong report. I suppose partly the figures about the younger population is from national rather than local data. Just wondered, partly on the back of the cafe and trying to go out to people rather than expect, is there any way we can look at the kind of social demographics of surveys? Because it might be interesting to see if the rating from IMD 1 is very different from the rating of IMD 10 in terms of engagement, just as the age profile. Because I wonder if there may be different perceptions according to your economic ability as well.
That's really interesting. We haven't done it for the public, but we have done it internally with staff. And actually, we're having some conversations recently about that IMD, the makeup and how those people access our information at work. And we've kind of been working with a few different people around the trust to think about how we perhaps challenge some of the norms in terms of expecting people to perhaps look at emails or do it in a digital way when maybe that might not be the right way. So we've got some good ideas on that, but that's a really good point because we were surprised when we looked at the staff IMD. I was personally very surprised by it. So maybe some that work can bleed into the public as well.
Can we maybe include a little bit of commentary on that next time round? Yes. Yeah, Jo.
It was just to add as well, we are starting to reflect that in our patient experience survey. So we're just about to pilot a new outpatient survey, and we're introducing the 10 IMDs, so we'll be able to cut the data by that and really understand patient experience from the different IMDs.
Good. Let's try and bring those two things together when we're reporting next time round. Thank you. Did I see another hand? Yes, Phil.
It was just a quick comment on the social impact report, which
great, wasn't it?
I mean, it really is fantastic reading. People haven't already looked at it, and it is an independent assessment of what we do. So just to emphasise that, but it is an excellent report.
Yeah, do you want to say anything further just about that? Just a couple of sentences on the social impact report?
I think it probably demonstrates that a bit like the local elections as well, people do sometimes see things as a whole, the NHS is one thing, but actually they do recognise the difference between experience between local and national. But it is really difficult to, when you've got one big national brand that has some very good performers and some not so good, to try and explain that locally other than through direct experience, which is why we're trying to use that pipeline of stories so explicitly, and we'll badge it up with local people and understanding where it's from so that people can appreciate things are different perhaps where you are.
Yeah, it's the nature of the media society we're in that there's a greater focus on bad news stories. And so the longer we can not have bad news stories about us, the better, really. Any more on that? We're asked to receive it as an update. We like the new branding. We think we commend you for the quality of the report and the information contained within it. There's further thought to be given to differentiation across the various IMD bands. We look forward to hearing more about the feedback on the working in partnership. We've still got some thinking, particularly about young people and how we make sure that we're accessing them. And let's just underline the social impact report. Those of you that haven't had the chance to read it, has it been circulated? I got a print copy yesterday, but has it been circulated to Russ?
I think it's been emailed around, but we do have a limited number of print copies if people would like.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you haven't had a chance to
Wayne was distributing them all at the governor's last night.
Yeah, okay, that's where I got it.
It was making sure we all got a copy.
Very good. Very good. Yeah. Okay, that's excellent. Thank you very much indeed. And we're in now to Net Zero Northumbria. Claire, warm welcome to you. This is just an update report, but there's plenty to update, isn't there?
There is plenty to update. So I'm going to go through three key things. One is to tackle an issue with the supply chain data that we presented back in November. So what we've done to rectify that. The second is to socialise the new Net Zero Northumbria targets that we want to publish imminently. I'm not going to go through them in any detail because they're all detailed within your pack. And then I'm going to do a very quick roundup of what we've done in the last 6 months. I did think I haven't touched it. So when Paul highlighted, he thought there was an issue with the supply chain data, which is presented with the graph on the right at the top. This is what we presented back in November. The blue is the supply chain data, so our 18 E-class code. So just as a reminder, we currently have estimated supply chain data within our carbon footprint, and we are working towards a hybrid approach because we've started to interact with our suppliers and get them to give us their data directly, which I'll get onto in the future. So Paul highlighted that he didn't think there had been as much of a reduction as we reported in November. We went back and triple checked the data. Our data was correct. There was definitely key areas that we had reductions in. However, we went to, after realizing that our data was completely correct, we went to Smart Carbon to try and figure out where the issue was. Turns out they put us onto a new template that was specific to the NHS, which in the future, it will be very, very useful. It will churn out exactly what we want for NHS reporting. However, I do like to know when I'm a guinea pig for things before they go down that path, which has meant that we've done well, actually Smart Carbon have done the full review of every year since our baseline because I wasn't convinced that it was just 24, 25 that would be the issue. So our data hadn't copied over correctly. The good news is that our overall carbon footprint is actually less. However, we did report a higher reduction in supply chain for the previous year. And you can see that basically it's almost identical to the 23, 24. So I'm going to be very transparent about that. That's where the issue was, and we'll make sure we're very transparent in our carbon footprint going forward, and our carbon reduction plan that we obviously need for bids from August this year when we need an update. So I wanted to put it out there. We now know how they are calculating our data. We've literally gone through every step, so we know that it is correct. We now have a much better reporting template because it does spit out exactly what we need. So the overall is that we're in a good place, but we did find that issue. Second thing to chat about is that we're about to publish our new Net Zero Northumbria Action Plan. This follows on from the one that we published in January 24. So we're now over 2 years in. We've had some great success. We are keeping our 8 overall portfolio areas because they've been well socialised within in our net zero approach. We've added in the digital transformation projects to reflect NHSE guidance going forward, and they've essentially been integrated into the sustainable healthcare portfolio. Some of these portfolio areas, they are very much a follow-on from our old Net Zero Northumbria targets, and some are totally new. So they're very aspirational and pushing forward, especially on the supply chain, which we had our targets in the last plan were not quite as aspirational because we just didn't have a baseline. So we're much further on. I'm not going to go through these in any detail. However, there's about 88 targets within those 8 portfolio areas that are smart and time bound for the next 2 years, all identified within the pack. And then a quick roundup of what we've been doing in the last 6 months since we did the report. So corporate approach, there's been lots of changes. HEFMA Awards next week. We've been shortlisted for the Sustainability Award. We've recruited the first alliance role. So we've got a Net Zero Alliance data officer who is looking at the 4 trusts, pulling together carbon footprints for all of us. And really, it's very much a levelling up exercise because Gateshead and North Cumbria are in very different places. So Pippa, who was our trust apprentice until just last month, has been successful in getting that role. So it's a great coup for her. It's really good. So she's working really heavily with Gateshead and North Cumbria currently, looking at all of their historic data because they don't have a baseline carbon footprint. Or rather, they have a buildings carbon footprint, but that kind of is it. So we're definitely progressing on that, and that'll put us in a really good position. We've recruited with some spare cash we had from one of my team dropping their hours, a clinical sustainability project manager who is working between me and Elaine Winkley on focusing on rolling out some of those real clinical projects within the trust. And Satisha's joined my team on a permanent basis as the active travel and transport manager, which means we've got far more resource to do those transport-led projects, which really we were just focusing on the active travel and getting people out of sole car use up to now. And we've published a sustainability annual report. We've managed to get some sustainability questions into the July staff experience survey, which is great. It will really help us tackle kind of communications going forward, what we need to concentrate on with our staff. And we've definitely got more net zero heroes now, and that engagement is building.
Keep it tight, Claire.
Okay. Buildings and estates, we've got really good progress with PSDS projects at the 3 sites. And we've joined, from a waste perspective, we've joined regional healthcare waste contract from September. We'll have much better rates for our healthcare waste, which is great. Huge savings to be had. We think that's just the tip of the iceberg. We've been, obviously our travel survey went live in February. We're just waiting for the results to come in to enable us to do some active travel work going forward. And we're just finishing our first year of outdoor air quality monitoring here at NSEC. So we'll be looking at that analysis soon. The supply chain 5-step framework we started to work towards. So we're getting in now data from our suppliers, which is great. That will enable us to build that hybrid carbon footprint. Because we basically joined in the Newcastle approach, we've had a really good response because most of the suppliers are quite similar. So we've managed to get 23% of the supply chain base already, which is really good. Greening and adapting has totally transformed in the last 3 years, and we've got huge buy-in from staff, and the link between patient and staff wellbeing and green space. We've managed to extend No Mow May this year, which is great. And from a sustainable healthcare point of view, Elaine's had great success with the introduction of consultant pre-assessment clinics at ANIC, which are obviously reducing miles travelled by patients, and they're getting really good feedback on that. That's as quick as I could do it.
Claire, thank you, and sorry for speeding you up. I want to make sure that there's time for questions. Let me start, though, by thanking you for the work that you've done in response to the issues we raised about the data and trying to understand where we are in Scope 3, and I feel much more confident now on the data there, and I thank you for that. Open it up for questions and comments. Just feeling really good news. We got the chance to dig in at a future occasion, but that was really good stuff, Claire. Thank you very much indeed. All good? Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, the Alliance update. Bijou, there's a lot in here.
So this paper would have come last month, but just because of elections, it was viewed that it was probably one that needed to stay till PERDA was finished. So just this is a summary document. It's the strategy really of an update. We're sharing it in terms of a progress report, highlighting the difference both that the Alliance is making, but also some of the challenges that we are trying to tackle head on. We want to work together. We've been really clear we want to work together to deliver excellent tertiary and secondary hospital services, but also at the same time strengthen our neighbourhood offer care closer to our patients, and obviously that will differ across the differing organisations for a whole host of reasons. I think the document's been there for everyone to read, so I was just going to open it up for any questions, Paul.
Thank you. Let's just go straight to questions and reflections. How do I interpret silence? Is that because people have had a good chance in previous settings?
I was going to development. This a couple of times already. Yeah.
So if the ask is to be happy with the new proposed strategic intent, we've discussed it on previous occasions, and we asked for a revision of the overall report, actually to make it a bit less optimistic and more honest about some of the challenges we've had in developing the Alliance. I'm hoping colleagues will feel that this version does reflect that. It's kind of says we're doing okay, but we're not doing as well as we'd hoped we would, and there's further progress to make. Does that give sufficient assurance for us to approve the strategic intent? Margaret?
Yeah, really good, honest report. I was just wondering what would make the difference to get that progress moving a little bit faster. We are very different organisations. We are coming together, and it's great to see chief execs and chairs going, but what will make that step change?
Yeah, I think so. Two things on that, Margaret. So there's a table, I think it's on page 90 of your packs, that talk through for each organisation, particularly the bilateral work that's being undertaken. And I think that's probably the first time it's been quite as explicit as that. And you'll see there are some things that are progressing, there's some things that are not progressing. I would probably say that the areas that haven't progressed as well, at least I can only talk for the Northumbria Newcastle bilateral element, is probably where there are quite deep-rooted history into why they've been the way they've been, or why services have been set up in the way that they have. And I think that probably at some point in the not too distant future, we'll have to start to get under that because it's historical issues rather than things for the here and now. And I think that's probably the bit that we haven't worked on as much. We've tried to just say, well, the past, let's move on from here. And at some point, I think you do have to go back and try. You can't have it one way or another. Sometimes you can focus too much on the past and not think, well, we need to draw a line and move forward. But sometimes I think in order to move forward, you've got to go backwards.
I mean, it's interesting in SQ&I, obviously we talk about a number of the areas that have been identified, that area we need to make further progress on, urology being one of the major ones. And what strikes me is about how we communicate, bring those teams together. And I know they are, because we keep asking and we're told, but some of the changes are not as speedily as we would hope, even though we're very keen on making that progress. And I'm looking at Jeremy, because Jeremy's part of all that discussion that we've been doing. And it's just like, what will make that step change?
Jeremy, do you want to respond on that and then use it as a trigger to put your own question?
So I can tell you that we've done a piece of work amongst the medical directors to have a look at, you know, how we approach some of our clinical colleagues, and it would be fair to say that actually the way we job plan and we organise ourselves, there's really quite a lot of commonality in what we think is good. But fundamentally, we're all starting from some very, very, very different starting points. And so if I were to illustrate that with a group in cardiology, which isn't one of the areas we wanted to bring, but it would be one that Gateshead wanted to bring, where they have 3 cardiologists, whereas our services, we have I think it's 11 or 12 now. There'll be slightly more in Newcastle with a tertiary focus, and a whole different service in North Cumbria. And it is very, very difficult when you're in such different starting places to have what you might describe as even-handed conversations that don't feel like taking over.
Thank you for that.
It is a real challenge. That isn't necessarily particularly the issue of urology, but of course with urology, a lot of the recruitment has gone into Newcastle, and the way our services are balanced and configured between sites, we would like to change, but that's difficult.
Thank you. That was responding to Margaret's point. Have you got a point of view on your head?
It was actually, that was what I was going to come in on.
Great. Okay, that's great. Then Maria.
Thank you, Chair. And my point dovetails quite nicely. Margaret's sort of in my head, I think. The question I want to ask is around what extent there's scope for a bottom-up approach. There has been a lot of work obviously undertaken by Jeremy and his counterparts across the Alliance to look at the clinical model. But the history is such that people have worked or tended to work very much for their own organizations. We are in a privileged position to have had discussions at this level to understand where there'll be cross-organizational working and have all of those discussions out in the open. But from the bottom up, that maybe isn't so much the case. And I just wondered to what extent conversations have happened to get that relationship building from the bottom up, from the clinical service point of view, to facilitate some of the things that strategically you and your counterparts have thought about.
Well, do you want to have a go at that, Jeremy? I'm to think there's a question about what we mean by bottom.
Well, yeah, no, and I would probably suggest that the bottom is actually the population. Yeah. I think at least one.
In this context, I meant the frontline clinicians. That's what I meant.
So there is a fair amount of mixing, and there always has been. We do have clinicians who work in both organisations. It is fairly unevenly balanced in that there's quite a number of Newcastle clinicians who undertake work within our buildings, but really relatively few opportunities for clinicians at that in the other at the other end. And I think there are reasons for that, and there are recruitment reasons for that. I think we do manage our clinicians in much the same way, and when they work together in the same buildings, we all understand each other very nicely. But I think one of my issues is that you get a bunch of doctors and you think it's about where the doctors work. I don't think this is about where the doctors work. This has to be about our populations. And one of the problems is if you talk to the doctors, they've got a number of clinical issues they just want you to fix. I need more haematologists. I need more cardiologists. But actually, the answer to that is to probably look at the cardiology needs of the population serving as a whole. And I don't think we're doing that necessarily. We're all in slightly different places. And it does challenge me for the Alliance in that I think we have a very important relationship with Newcastle hospitals between a secondary care provider and a tertiary care provider. There are many services that we absolutely will rely on, and we can't ever we can't ever even want to have. But it's a different matter when you're talking about our relationship with them as when they're providing secondary care services, but I think inevitably for them that's very different because they're providing both aspects for the population and not just Northumberland and
Thank you.
Tyneside.
Okay, James covered your point. Then I've got Phil and then Steve. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. I mean, I think it's fine as a paper around strategic intent, but one of the things I think that we struggle with sometimes is to understand how we achieve what we set out to do, and sometimes it can feel a bit difficult to get hold of that. And I think in many ways, the stage 2 piece of this, we need to think quite carefully about how we make things specific in terms of what we intend to do and try and provide some kind of targets about where do we want to get to. Because it is difficult when you come back and look at it just at the strategic intent level to say, well, did we achieve that or not? Because a lot of the stuff you kind of go, yeah, well, we probably did, but we're not entirely sure exactly how much further we got from where we started. So there is something about perhaps trying to get better evidence about the impact that it's had working at the Alliance level, which I think we do need to drill down to that stage 2 piece. So just the question around that is, when do we think we can come back with some more granular information around what we're going to set ourselves as targets or challenges under stage 2 piece?
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, the challenge in all of that is also what is each individual organisation's responsibility to deliver on when you start to set those kind of metrics. So we've always talked about, as part of the Alliance, everybody, I'm going to say, levelling up, we shouldn't level down. And I think in order to level up, there's got to be a conversation about what each organisation is going to do. We've been very committed. We're not going to go any slower than what we're doing. We've got an ambition to hit, if we think about some of our core performance metrics, constitutional standards, some of them being quite stretching. What we're saying is we want everybody to have that ambition. That needs to come from each individual organisation to say whether we're going to collectively do that. So I think when we start to put hard metrics on it, that will tease out some of this. But I would envisage there's also that balance of how much of that is then about the Alliance versus how much of that is each organisation just saying, yes, we're going to drive for excellence and this is what we envisage that to look like. Is that the Alliance, or is that each individual organisation just having that drive to do that?
Well, maybe,
chicken and egg, maybe.
Yeah, I know, I fully understand that point. So maybe we need to ask that question at the same time, which is to say, how is the Alliance going to impact on this? Because if it's nothing more than the targets of 3 individual organisations.
Yeah. The other bit I think that's probably worth thinking about is how the ICB is aligning itself is also very different now from what it was 2 years ago. So they have naturally, they talk about or call them nested collaboratives. So the North, our Alliance is seen as one. Across, you've just seen, I think, the recent announcement now across South Tyneside, Sunderland, County Durham, and that's another one, Central Patch, and then the Tees Patch, that's another one. So they're now, I'm going to say, without formally clustering us, clustering us into, well, actually, can the North just sort that out? Can the South just sort that out? Can Central just sort that out amongst yourselves, sort of thing? So I think it's also playing in line with how the regional position is shifting. That was one thing. And then the other bit is, I think we shouldn't underestimate some of the, and I, you know, you've heard me say this before, being able to have some conversations now that were perhaps difficult to have with partner organisations previously, and that is very difficult to measure.
We have moved on.
Yeah,
we have moved
so
on.
I think that is also, we are in a different environment now, I think. But I completely take on board what you're saying in terms of that.
Jeremy, then Surat, then I'm tempted to move on. So
it is a very difficult problem to solve, Chair. But I mean, I think we haven't necessarily got the domain of what we expect good improvement would be. I think there is a sense that we'll have staff moving all over the shop and different staff working in different locations, and that may be the case. But I would like to say that there's a number of NHS improvements that we know are absolutely effective. Day case surgery, the rates at which you do day case arthroplasty. And so I think there is so much learning about improving the processes that we do together that we could actually share and work with each other on, instead of, in the end, trying to trade resources, which I think is extraordinarily difficult. Yeah. And I'm not saying that we don't have to do that, but actually the environment a better way. I think is to look at what is our collective ambition and how do we express what good really looks like, and have we got a collective ambition to get there?
So I think Jeremy's point is really valid, and it's been one of the conversations at the Chief Exec's meeting, the North Chief Exec's meeting, which has been around, rather than picking the problem areas, actually there may be something in order to drive that improvement of saying, well, we all know what, for example, our day case rate is. It's pretty good, but actually how do we do even better? Rather than, I need you to help me out because I've got this problem over here, which then causes you a problem, if that makes sense. And I think shifting that approach, we may gain more as a consequence.
I missed Steve, forgive me. Steve and then Surat, and then I'll move us on.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome the pragmatic approach in the paper. I think it's well set out. I think the patients and the population will thank us for that pragmatic approach. I'm just a little uncertain about the paper. It's got to receive, but the strategic intent document has some approvals contained within it, particularly recommendation 6 is about governance. And I just want to make sure where this paper goes next in terms of getting the recommendations approved.
Actually, that's a good point, because it's down as to receive, but I'd got in my mind that we were signing off on the strategic intent, the Alliance on behalf of Northumbria. I mean, it's a collective strategic intent, but each board is being asked to approve it. Yeah. And so then the recommendation 6, I can't find what page that's on, forgive me.
Page 12 of the document.
One of the
page 82 of the pack, just 1 second. No, I still can't find it. Okay, read it out for me, somebody, will you?
Approve this.
Got it. Yeah. Recognise that the function of the Alliance should be focused on delivering excellent tertiary. Is it that one you're talking about, Steve?
That's right. I just wanted to make sure that if the different boards are having to approve changes to the form of governance, that we at least know the site of the document.
Well, okay, I still haven't got what we're talking about here. I'm really sorry, Steve. What's the recommendation that you're querying?
Recommendation 6, recognising that the function of the Alliance will be focused on delivering excellent tertiary, excellent secondary care, we are minded to adjust the governance form of the Alliance.
Oh yes, okay, now I've got
to help us to deliver. And then on the next steps, it says boards to approve, which is at the following page.
But Paul, it is clear that the recommendations don't need a structural change. If you read point 50, it's just the approval of the strategy. We did look at this, whether we needed to refunction the committee, and we don't.
Yes. Okay, Steve, we don't need to do that because it's tinkering and it's within delegated decisions that have previously been made. I think I can give you that assurance.
So we're not seeking approval.
We're seeking
to receive.
support and strategic intent,
It's covered in point 50.
but the governance points are covered, are not required. Are you okay with that, Steve? So that.
I think some of the points on the metrics have already been covered. I was going to make a point because in point 51, there is a very much an intent to put this into a roadmap of delivery. And I think Biju and Jeremy have made great points on the metrics. And I think one of the things that would really help is to have what success looks like against that roadmap, because I think quite often we have a roadmap of delivery, which is very much an intent to do things. And I think I appreciate the complexity around, how you can define success and those metrics for that roadmap. So I think that would be just a comment in terms of how we look at success for that roadmap beyond the strategic intent. And then the other point I wanted to make, which goes to Maria's point, is, I've seen the recommendations and I think we're thinking top down or bottom up. I think there's also a point about inside out versus outside in. And I've seen some really great examples of this being led by patient and population services. And I think, a lot of the time it feels like the Alliance talks about the trust first, and then, we go to the patient and the population is the end result. And I think it could be, in the delivery roadmap, it'd be nice to see a bit more outside in, starting with the patient and the population, and then seeing how that integrates into the trust, delivering that roadmap.
That's really helpful. That's been a really interesting debate and discussion all around. And one of the things it throws up to me is we made a mistake in only allocating a small amount of time to receive this as an update, because although we have discussed versions of this elsewhere, there is an appetite at board level for us to engage more than we've currently done. We see that this is an important part of the achievement of the trust, will be the achievement of the Alliance as well. So one action for us is, Biju, you and I need to think about how to make sure we've got a bit more time in board development in the coming period, and make sure that in future occasions where the update reports or decisions that we're allocating sufficient time to have a proper detailed discussion on it. I'm going to summarize only a little bit of this. First of all, I should have said right at the beginning to remind I chair the Alliance and therefore I have an additional interest from this point of view. I think that I would pick out a point that Biju slipped in that she's previously said, which is let's not forget the long-term perspective here. 3 years ago, the things that we're currently doing would have seemed remarkable. And so although in the last year, as I've been public and said previously, we haven't achieved everything we wanted to do as an Alliance, we've nonetheless achieved more than most people thought would have been possible. And the opportunities of this strategic intent mean that maybe we can kind of reset. Well, I wish I hadn't used that phrase, but maybe we can recalibrate our aspirations and ambitions for the years ahead. I think some of the specific comments about being that much more overtly driven by population and public needs are really well made, and the impact that should have on the work that the clinicians are now collectively doing through the new clinical framework group that's chaired by the medical director in Gateshead, I think will take a lot of that account, and a lot of those points from Jeremy about how many of the improvements are will come through overall lessons of how we improve services and outcomes, rather than anything specific to the structural changes, the structures of our own trusts. Getting greater clarity from this about what success will look like and how we interact with the wider world, I think, are powerful messages. To remind you that the steering group of the Alliance consists of the chief executives, the chairs and the vice chairs, plus the various leads. And so Paul Dunn's regularly there for the finance leads. That was really good. I don't think I've summarized it very well, but there's plenty of meat in there for us to take on. And let's move on now. Only 15 minutes or so over time, which is normally the case by the time we get to you, Stephen, on the health and safety.
Okay, thank you. Over the last 2 months, the number of accidents incidents have been about the same as previous 2 months, 99. 190 reported incidents of abusive staff, which is about the same as the previous 2 months as well. One widow incident, which is the 7 days off work, which is quite low across all trusts, where we're doing really well on the number of widow incidents reported in the last 12 months. So it's a good work in there. We sent 33 warning letters out in the previous 2 months, which was a big increase from 10 in the previous months. 10 exclusion letters, which is a rise from 7. So we're working closely with the Alliance on communicating better around the different trusts. The violence prevention reduction strategy, we've now finished the staff focus groups. We're going to be presenting these to various boards, and we'd like to present this at the staff September board, an update of what we've been doing on that. Fire incidents, a reduction of incidents or activations of fire alarms, which has been no fires in the previous 2 months. Martin's Law, I've added an appendix about board responsibilities on Martin's Law now that the legislation is out. So I'm working with the A3BR team on this, and it's just really about what the board responsibilities are. But it's up to now. We've now identified the board responsible person, which is Damon Kent. We've set up our first committee, which is a meeting next month, and we're going to conduct our first site risk assessment following the legislation, and that's going to be at Hexham next week. So it's really just a dummy one kind of thing, but it's still quite unaware of what we're going to be finding. But I will be part of the agenda item on my board report now for Martin's Law until everything's been implemented.
Thank you very much indeed for that. We've been previously briefed on Martin's Law. I've got Kate and then Fiji. Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you, Stephen. It's just to say to the board, we received a really good update yesterday on the violence and prevention strategy. So Kirsty Shotton came to People and Culture Committee, and we were assured that that's going in the right direction and there's a strategy now available, but we just asked for continual review at PCC just to ensure that action's being taken, and we're seeing a difference in the levels of violence and aggression.
Yeah, that's reassuring to hear.
It's to follow on from that, really. The point we did pick up is covering volunteers, because obviously our volunteers are at the front face of the door a lot of the time, and we were assured that that was the case, Stephen, that the volunteers are included in that. And the other point we just wanted to be clear that we were making sure we were picking up is that the community staff are often in difficult situations, not in a premises with other people, so they're on their own. And we've asked Kirsty to ensure that we pick up on the community risk point.
I work closely with Jason Wilkes on the community, yeah, so he feeds into our team, yeah.
Good, okay. Richard.
So just really probably following on from that, just reflect on the one riddle that we have reported. I mean, it's a truly awful thing to have happened for a student nurse to have ended up having fractured eye socket on the back of escorting level 4's risk patients to the toilet. And it just brings up so many concerns, not only about violence and aggression, but also how we the experience it's giving to students. Wouldn't want us not to reflect on it's you read a lot of riddles and you think, oh, that's stupid, avoidable accident. This is really quite a nasty one.
And obviously it's shocking to read. Well, what is the learning from it?
The patient at that time was with dementia and delirium. Yeah, so it's just really given our staff the training to deal with these situations. But I think this one was unavoidable with the illness the patient had.
Yeah,
unfortunately, but it was a nasty one.
Okay, thank you for that. The biggest kind of change in data is the increase in number of exclusions. And linked to that, the yellow cards being issued. Do you think this is a once-off, or do you think this is a trend? Are we expecting next time to see it?
I think it's better reporting because of the work myself and Kirsty's doing with violence and prevention. I think it's more awareness for staff that we have these different ways of dealing with patients or staff and patients who are causing their violence and aggression towards our staff.
So it's partly a matter of getting greater grip.
I think it'll go up before.
Of course, exclusion simply passes the problem on somewhere else. So, yeah.
I think, and Kate and I have had this debate quite a bit around violence and aggression when particularly, and it's also about verbal abuse as well that you sometimes hear about how we impact that change. We can say that we won't tolerate it, exclusions, etc. It's how you kind of when it is public. Fair enough, if it's staff on staff, we can address that. But where it's from the public, it can be quite difficult to manage because you don't know, literally, you don't know what's coming in through the door. I think that's quite a challenging one for us to balance how we manage and look after patients who might not always be pleasant versus our responsibility to look after people who are unwell versus looking after our staff at the same time. I think it is quite a challenge.
Caregiver responsibility,
Yeah,
just
I
to
think it's
remind us also that people and culture are crawling all over.
Yes, and I think you do. It is a really good challenge, and we talked yesterday about that outward-facing campaign to public about what we tolerate and what we don't, and we also had a good update around police and them being part of some of the areas where some of these violence and aggression issues happen, and there was just some assurance around them being more active within ED, for example.
Okay, the one measure of a good report is that we can focus in on important issues, and it was a good report, well presented. The specific issue has tended to be around violence. We've had some assurance that people and culture on it. We've had assurance that volunteers are part of that. We recognise that we haven't got it entirely sussed when we've got a riddle or a complaint about a student nurse getting assaulted, certainly injured as a consequence of interaction with a violent patient with dementia. And we will continue to keep an eye on this. I'd also like to feel that when people in culture are looking at it, they're quite rightly looking at it from the point of view of our staff and our volunteers, but not losing sight of the potential impact more widely. If we exclude someone violent here, what does that do to where they next go if they're not welcomed with us? Are we happy to receive the report?
Sorry, Paul, I should just say, even when we do exclude, if somebody turns up in an emergency, we do not, we would treat them, we would not turn them away.
Forgive me, you're right to have reminded me to say that. Thank you. Then good, Stephen, thank you very much indeed. Kate, you're on with the pod development report dashboard, which is looking, I mean, it's there as mid-orange. It felt quite positive, I have to say.
Thank you. Yes, and I think that's how we feel as well, and how the People and Culture Committee reflected yesterday. It's a strong dashboard and a bit of an overview around absence continuing to decrease. I think we potentially might stabilise. So we talked about that yesterday, about how we sustain that reduction in absence, strong compliance of stat and mandatory training. And I think there's a couple of areas in there that have continued to be stable, but areas we need to work on. So those two areas being the length of time for disciplinaries and grievances. That's going to be one of our focuses for this year. It will mean a significant change in some of the HR policies that we use in order to reduce the length of those investigations, and that is coming to PCC in July. And also on the recruitment efficiency and time to hire, we are starting a improvement project on that and how we can reduce that and continue to work on the time to hire. I just wanted to pull out a couple of bits from the report. So from a staff experience perspective, the three areas that we're going to look at as a trust moving forward, which are improvement of the appraisal process, improving access to affordable and nutritious food, and continuing to improve the options available for flexible working. So they're going to be our overarching three areas from the National Staff Survey, and the business units will also have their own areas that they need to work on as well. I also wanted to pull out the Lead Employer Trust contract had been renewed for a period of 5 years, and that's good news. So the Lead Employer Trust hosts all of the resident doctors across the region, and then we'll continue to look at the Lead Employer Trust and how we can continue to improve on that. And then finally, probably most importantly, the Employment Rights Act. So there's an update within the report about some of the up and coming changes to the Act. We've again taken updates to People and Culture Committee on it. There are some significant changes in the Act that will implicate on the People Services team, and we're taking all reasonable steps to look at that and put plans in place. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Great report, great dashboard. Margaret, Katie isn't here, but are you any reflections from People and Culture? Are you on? Is your mic on?
So, yes, some really good discussions because we've made some real improvements in People and Culture, and you can really see from the dashboard the progress we've actually made. I think in certain areas, one of the things we constantly look at is how do we benefit our workforce and what do we do to try and improve the standards of our workforce. There's obviously a lot of discussions that go on that, not necessarily on that dashboard.
Good, thank you for that. In the knowledge that People and Culture have chewed over this in a lot of detail. Are there any points, challenges, issues people want to raise? I think we're in a pretty positive position here, but what I like is the fact that the areas identified from the staff survey you're focusing in on, they're areas we're not yet top of the pile, and so we aspire to be.
I think it was similar to Ross. I think we're in a strong position, but there's still lots to do and things we can improve.
Always. Thank you very much indeed. That's just great. Then annual reports is just one of them this cycle, which is the Emergency Preparedness, Resilience and Response Report. Alison, you did a great presentation to the governors last night, and they enjoyed it, and they gave you a round of applause as well. I don't think you'll get that today here. We're not a round of applause type of board, but over to you to present the report which we're being asked to approve.
Thank you. Just really want to say a big thanks to Marion and Margaret for the last year for their support of the emergency preparedness. Yes, asking the board to note and approve this comprehensive report. You've all had it, you've all read it. I'm not going to labour over it, but I think the important parts are page 7, just acknowledging that the trust submitted their core standards submission, and we've achieved substantial compliance.
Bit shabby, 99%, isn't it?
Isn't it? I'll sack that manager. Yeah. Pages 8 and 9 does detail the work undertaken through 25 and 26, and obviously what we're planning for the forthcoming year. Happy to take any further suggestions for work you might want done at the forthcoming year. And again, pages 12 plus just details all the training, exercises, incidents and other work we've done in the last year. It doesn't seem a lot when you put it on paper, but it felt like a busy year.
What have you been doing?
Yeah, I've got no further comments unless anybody's got any questions.
Excellent, thank you. And Margaret chairs the board that has the scrutiny of it, so any reflections?
Yeah, a big thank you to Alison. I mean, obviously, you really lead this sort of group together, and it's very well attended, and there's a lot of discussion and dialogue, and we're much more focused than I think we probably were more than a year ago, and very clear, and it's great to see our plans going forward. So big thank you from me to everybody.
Very good, very good. Questions, comments? Marianne, anything to add?
Just, Alison and the team have done a great job, and I think with having a clinical lead in post as well with Claire, I think that really has cemented the whole infrastructure with the managerial teams, the nursing teams and the clinical teams.
Good, thank you. Then ready to approve? Absolutely, that's great. Thank you. Can we move on to the next section, which is the patient and staff experience? We'll start with the stories, and just say as an intro, that normally we kind of alternate the patient stories between those that are broadly complementary and those that have got some real challenge for us. And I've been kind of anticipating that this time we were due to get the challenging one, and just simply timing hasn't worked. So we've got one which is giving us a lot of strokes, and that's fine. But I just want assurance that next time it's going to be the more challenging one. Yeah, good. Okay. Then with that assurance, Jo, do you want to introduce?
Thank you, Chair. So those of you who know some of the wider programme work, you'll know that in my team, we lead on the improvement plan for improving the experience of carers, unpaid carers and staff with a caring responsibility. When I first read this story, it absolutely beautifully illustrates what we would want for all carers in terms of the experience, not only of their mum who had dementia, but actually how the ward staff supported this lady through the process, and the worries and the concerns that she had for her mum who has dementia and was admitted onto one of our wards. I'll just pull out a couple of comments that you all know I'm an emotional person, so really hit me in the heart. Was she describes moments of warmth and familiarity. She described feeling trust in the team when she had to leave her mum, obviously, on the ward to be cared for. She describes the quality of care that was well managed and safe, and how she felt supported, understood and deeply grateful for the reassurance that Ward 1 in NSEC gave her in terms of the care that they gave to her mum. I actually looked at their real-time scores, so they have lots of 10s, but they've had across January, February, March, April, May, they had 3 out of 4 10s for respect and dignity in their real-time score. So that's illustrated by other patients through the data as well. the staff story came from a ward sister who's seconded into that role. She talks about her learning and the enjoyment of being in that role. I think what really stood out for me as a reader was she talks about the teamwork, how they work together, how they do team development days. She's honest, she talks about the challenges that they can face in terms of work pressures and staffing levels at times. Another important aspect as well for me was how she talks about how they welcome their new starters and integrate into a team. And we know how important that is when you're coming into a new post and you're part of a clinical team and other types of teams. And I think a demonstration of all of those things she's talking about is how she talks about how they many members of the ward team have worked there for a long time and they retain their ward team as well, all of which add up in a positive patient experience. So I'll stop there.
That's great. Thank you. And you'll give me the names. I mean, the reports are properly anonymous. Please give me the name by the end of tomorrow, please, so that I can go. Thank you. The board knows I write to people who have been praised within the board or who have contributed. Thank you. Any questions or comments arising out of this? Yes, Kate.
Thank you. Just one for me. Joe, it hit me as well with the ward manager around the introduction of people onto the ward and how important that is for staff members. It'd be helpful to just understand exactly what she does and how she does it, because I think there's probably some best practice there that we can spread across the trust. Yeah, thanks, Kate.
So important to ensure we capture best practice and use it. And Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, so it's one of the few places at NSETH I have been an inpatient. I have to say that it is an environment that I think, and a cohort of patients and problems that you could consider to be a challenging to manage as well as they do. And I have to say that you know, whilst I take your point, Chair, that you know, they do an extremely good job and they are very, very attentive to what is a very frail and vulnerable population who are exposed to really difficult circumstances in their life. And I just thank all of them in the surgical team for their effort. That you know, there'll be 8 or 9 patients going up the theatre every day. Their various fractures fixed. But well done.
Thank you. Then let's hold that in our mind as we move on to the next paper from Joe, which is the patient and staff experience report, particularly because actually the NSETH doesn't the trend is not quite perfect, is it? In other words, it's downwards in terms of satisfaction ratings. We've just heard a beautiful story about Ward 1. Just like us to triangulate those two things in this report. And the other thing to say is that later on today in board development, we're reviewing whether there's any changes we could be making to the way in which we bring reports of this nature to the board to ensure that we can focus all the more on the real strategic issues and not get lost in the detail of the data. Over to you, Jo.
Thank you, Chair. So board will know that we have various elements to our patient experience measurement programme. So Patient Perspective is our CQC approved third-party provider that measures across outpatient, inpatient, day case and emergency care. When we look at the excellent ratings of scores across January, February, March, we see consistent scores with just one area of negative significance for outpatients when we compare January to March scores. When we look at the overall scores in patients across all of those areas, we make, as an overall score, we maintain in the top 20% when we benchmark ourselves against the comparative national survey questions. As the Chair's pointed out, when we look by site, this is where we see some of the negative variation. So we see a steady decline in NSEC around inpatients and ED, and they fall out of the top 20%. In terms of areas for improvement, Bijou talked about this before as a trust-wide project. For inpatients, we see that an area for focus is discharge, and we see that consistently across our surveys. And when we look at ED from the patient perspective data, we know that the areas for improvement are waiting times for our patients, pain management, and receiving adequate information. We also see some of that triangulated in our real-time data. However, I will say for real-time ED for the month of April, we saw some really positive improvement we saw a significant change improvement in the score for respect and dignity with a score of 10. We saw the best average domain score of this year. 6 out of 10 of the individual domain scores were above 95%. Also, we saw the best weight score since last summer and the best pain score since July 25. So I think there's some great stuff to celebrate there in terms of some improvements. When we look at our inpatient score, we see for real time, we see consistently strong performance. And we've talked about this on previous occasions. An area for improvement is food. So I'm meeting with Brian from NHFM next week, and we're going to be looking at the improvement areas that we could do. There was some real improvement made on children's ward. You may remember some of the lower scores, and the team did some phenomenal work there with menus. So we're going to look at see how we can replicate that. In terms of our community programme, again, delivered by Patient Perspective, they have an excellent satisfaction score of 96%. In terms of focus, it's around access to treatment, waiting times, information, and communication and coordination. The strength, as we see across all of our surveys, relates very much to the interactions with our staff, how our patients feel listened to in the community, and how they are respected and supported to ask the questions that they need to ask. And then PEP, so our PEP is where patients leave reviews on NHS website, all of the social media such as Google, and we score 3.8 in terms of how patients rate us in the public domain, and that compares to 3.5 both regionally and nationally, so we're just ahead there. Looking at our local staff survey, so we finished in April, so we had a good response rate of just over 4,000. We've seen a significant improvement in the score for I have the tools and equipment to do my job. Across all of the other questions across the 3 domains, I think we were relatively stable. We continued to see some of our highest scores in, we call them our barometer questions, which are our advocacy questions within the NHSE questions. So those relate to essentially how our staff rate the care that we give to our patients in terms of they would be happy for family members or people they care for to be cared for, and how they would recommend the organisation as a place to work. I'll finish there.
Thank you. Really good and clear, Bijou.
Can I just ask Jo, there feels a little bit of possibly a little bit of a disconnect between the patient perspective data and our real-time data, particularly around our wards. So do you have a feel for why that might be? Is it because it's the one-off sampling for patient perspective, whereas ours is continuous sampling? So when I look at the NSEC scores, for example, you might get 1 month where they've dropped a little bit. Generally, they're pretty strong. So that it feels like it's slightly out of kilter with what the patient perspective one's saying. And I appreciate that they're asking slightly different questions and our domains are probably a bit more detailed. Do you have a view on that?
I think there will be probably a couple of views. One is we absolutely do a broad range of patients through the real time because it can be absolutely inclusive in terms of, I've just been talking to Newcastle about it actually, that our staff are really skilled in making reasonable adjustments when it's a face-to-face interview to be able to include. Patients are self-selecting through the text. But also in terms of, if you think about when we do the measurement, we purposely do it at 2 weeks post-discharge with patient perspective because research shows if we're going to be dissatisfied, it is generally at the 2-week point. So we really test ourselves at that point to say, let's ask people questions when we know evidence shows us they're more likely to be dissatisfied. So that's probably explains some of the variance, and the broader range of people that we're including, I think, will also be an issue as well.
Ruth?
Jo, I know you've got discharge planning as one of the issues to raise. It's come up for me with governors and patient feedback, and then a bit through going out to community, that the quality of our discharge information for patients varies massively.
Yeah.
And I just would want some reassurance that we're going to look at that. I don't know where it gets picked up as a project, but we had a bit of feedback from patients saying they get sometimes really complicated discharge summaries that probably is too much information or not the right level of information for a patient. Yet then the other extreme, we've got community nurses where they're saying they're getting a report that just says stitches. Yeah. And we're not obviously getting that balance right. I just don't know how we pick that up.
Where's that picked up then?
So it's being picked up in the flow improvement group as part of the discharge improvement work. So Joe and I are meeting either later this week or next week to bring Joe into that. So hopefully we'll make some progress.
Good. Let's keep an eye on that then and see whether we see an upturn in positive messages around discharge.
And we're really fortunate because Health Watch have offered to help us in terms of that patient engagement involvement in the work.
Well, Maria first and then Richard.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the report, Joe. Just to bring to the board's attention that at last Safety, Quality and Improvement Committee, we discussed for a fair bit of time about one of the metrics within the emergency department, which is around pain as experienced by patients. And the committee, several members of the committee raised that this is a recurring theme. And there's a sense within those of us in the committee that this is possibly around messaging, around management of pain, but we don't really understand because we know that there are mitigations in place within the emergency department to give pain medication. So one of the things that we discussed with Joe is around drilling down to look at what exactly is driving those metrics to see if it's around perception, if it's actually pain scores, is it around timing? We don't really know. So it's just to raise that.
Thank you. And when do we expect to get some input to SQ&I on?
So we're also looking at, and the back of that conversation is both Gateshead and Newcastle do the same ED survey as us, which they adopted from us, and we're going to look at their pain scores, first of all, to benchmark against them, and then to do the deep dive that Maria's described. I also forgot to mention that we know that each of the Band 7s are managing each domain area within ED, so I'll work with the Band 7 for pain management. But just yesterday, I had a conversation with one of the Band 7s who's actually got the waiting domain. So we're doing a piece of patient engagement work with her in partnership with her to look at how we can improve the wait, but more importantly, in terms of the information that we give patients about the wait on the boards, etc. So we're doing some work with her. So we'll probably replicate something similar with pain management for with the Band 7 there too.
Very good. Thank you, Richard.
So I fully support the work that's going to be done on discharge planning because I think there's so much opportunity for patient experience and for getting beds cleared earlier. So yeah, all power to that. I would just reflect though the change that happened not that long ago to the format of the discharge letter, because the last one I saw was actually really good from where it was 2-3 years ago, which was almost unintelligible. So I think we have done a lot of work already on that. And yeah, I think views of it will change as people see more of the new format.
Well, that's encouraging, but from the sound of it, the new improved model hasn't rolled out to everywhere yet. So there's clearly still some work to be done. Ross.
I was going to mention that as well. I know the health literacy, easy for me to say, health literacy group have done a lot of work on letters and making sure people can understand them. The second bit was just in some ways, it's quite good that it all lines up because this issue came through the PALS data as well, where people make raise informal issues. It was about communications, particularly around discharge. So good that we've identified it and that we can do something about it.
Hannah? Sorry, were you pointing me towards Jeremy?
I think Jeremy was
pointing at me. I was just ignoring you.
It's just, I couldn't resist it because Richard brought it up. I think that the formatting of the discharge summary is something that I think we should continue, I'm afraid, to evolve. It is still a one-size-fits-all, but discharges are absolutely not a one-size-fits-all. The amount of communication that's needed at the end of a long and complex stay, and it is very, very different. And it does unfortunately have to serve a number of purposes because it isn't just a communication to the patient, even though we address it to them, but it's also a communication to both community nurses, doctors, other secondary care colleagues. So we do expect a lot of a single document, but I think we could be more flexible in our approach to it.
That's a point well made. Hannah?
So I thought earlier on when we were talking about discharge communication, not about the discharge summary, which is the clinical summary to the patient and the GP, but just how we start communicating from the point of admission in terms of this is what it might look like from a transport perspective.
Yeah.
This is what you might see. This is where you might go. So I think they're two separate things that we need to look at in parallel and are looking at in parallel as part of the flow improvement group.
Very good. Thank you for that. Marion.
I think that's an excellent point, because I think it is about expectation, and if we can just preempt and give them as much information as we can, I think it's really helpful.
Okay. Any more to Joe? We've appreciated the report, and we're getting increasingly good, I think, at honing in on what are the new issues compared to the ones we've previously talked about. And I welcome the fact that we're able to do that, and that we're starting to get some assurance, for example, on the issue of discharge. It's not easy, it's not going to be a simple solution, but there's work going on to address some of those areas where people understandably and correctly are not yet satisfied with the quality and range of the information and style of the information that's being provided. Reassured to hear that there's further work going on pain. I suspect that we're not going to find really clear messages of how we need to do things differently, because when you're in pain, it's very hard to find a positive, really. And I'm not sure if we know how we compare to other trusts that have got as robust a system of real-time information and satisfaction on the management of pain within an ED setting. It would be interesting to get that at some point. Do you want to come in? Yeah.
Just very quickly on that point, Chair, that there is a paper being produced for the Alliance around our respective real-time patient experience in ED. We might have that.
Yeah, that's very good, and that could usefully come out, and that's an area where I think our experience is enabling us to benefit our colleagues within the Alliance in developing. And I think getting information more widely across the piece will be of value to us, as well as clearly significant value to them. We've still got some work to do on the triangulation between when we get positives in one area and not quite so positive in another, and trying to align to work out what the real meaning is from that. But I think we should be finishing with feeling, I think we've got assurance both that overall the patient and indeed staff experience is positive, but secondly, I think we've got assurance to the board that we're pretty well on top of the processes that enable us as a board to be seeing the information that we need to give to feel okay and to spot problems as they start to arise. Does that summary capture the situation for you all? Colleagues, thank you. Then let's move straight on into the board walkabouts. As you know, this is my favourite part of the board. The chance to kind of deep dive a little bit further. So we got 4 of them. Ruth, you were the first one, along with Hannah in the Community Services District Nursing team. A few big issues came out.
Yeah, it did. It was a really good visit. I've not been out to district nursing before, and I suppose I don't think I really had a perspective of quite how much they did, and the comment that they were never full, which was the really interesting one. They just get patients just keep turning up and they can't shut. They're a bit like the ED. They were really positive. It was lovely to meet them all, and what was interesting was, despite the fact that we raised some issues, particularly around IT, they were such a positive bunch, and they all loved their job, and they all loved what they did. And given that's quite a complex issue and you're dealing with patients in their homes at difficult times, they were brilliant. They were really bothered about patient continuity and about how they rostered, so they made sure that they served the same patient through a period of time, and I really appreciated their kind of approach to that. The big negative was the IT issue, I suspect, because when they actually started explaining to us their IT issues, I was really concerned. I will say positively, I came back and told Bijou about that, and within a day, we'd had somebody out to see them all and solving a lot of their problems. That was a really positive response. And I'm just looking at my actions. Out of the actions, we dealt with the IT. Hannah got in touch with the council about parking. We're already onto the lone worker point. Marion's discussed with me Tinzarapan. So all of that within a couple of days had all been picked up. So it's a really positive bit of feedback, and they're very appreciative of the IT input, definitely.
Very good.
Just on that, and it was with a difference. I was at Hadrian Park yesterday, and I think the bit that we all probably need to remember is within the community services teams, even if we just take the district nursing, forget all the other complex work that they do, I'm going to say their issues or the things they deal with that are a problem for them are very, very different. So if you go to Rothbury, you'll get a very different view of the world and the issues that worry them. At Hadrian Park, it was really interesting, the conversation yesterday. So IT did come up, but in a positive way, in that they're already trialling something be technical, I don't understand it fully, about 2 SIMs in the laptop, which makes life a lot easier. And they were very much of the advocate. They were very pleased with how IT were trying to help them work through that. And can we hurry up and roll that out? By the way, I said it shouldn't be a problem, Dave. The bit, though, that really struck for me was because of where they're located, they're dealing with Northumbria patients and they're dealing with Newcastle patients. And then all the complexities of that cognitive switch of, well, Northumbria do things this way, so I now need to do and access these systems, and Newcastle do things this way, and that patient has a Newcastle GP, so now I need to do things in a very different way, and even down to the GP systems that they use, and how Newcastle might send an SBAR through a paper form versus an electronic form versus can you read it, can you not, who do I contact? So they're constantly holding all of these lists of numbers, and I think it's probably we have to be quite mindful of the fact we like to do a one size fits all, don't we? That this is what we're going to do and we're going to roll that out everywhere. I think in community, we've just always got to be cognizant that it's never a one size fits all, and we'll never get it to be that way. It's got to be a lot more bespoke for the teams because their challenges are very different.
Good reminder. So that. And then Dave.
Yeah, I recognize and thank you, Bija. I recognize that technology and IT in community is challenging because of where it sits. But I think one of the things I'd like reassurance on, I think in this case, it was really helpful that Ruth was there and there was a walkabout and these issues were immediately dealt with. I'm really keen to understand how we try. I mean, these are significant issues that were impeding their ability to perform, how we triage those issues, particularly from an IT perspective, and just some reassurance on that, had Ruth not been there, what would have been the timescale to have resolved those issues?
Do you want to say anything on that, Dave?
Yeah, so I'd love to say the team were just waiting for Ruth's call to go into them. But the fact is they knew about the issue and they knew about the issue that the community were having. And the solution was to put the trial in the Bijou. So yesterday, quickly in for that team to resolve the current problems. So they are aware of the challenges of remote connectivity and connectivity, particularly at sites that we necessarily don't control the infrastructure in, which is the biggest problem. So there are a number of solutions at the trial, and there's a number of new laptop trials going in over the next couple of weeks as well, with a view to how can we roll this out wider. So the team were aware of it and we're already working on a solution. I think that's why it was so easily solved from a Ruth's point of view. But it's not to say that we don't have issues elsewhere. If you think of North Northumberland and the change in the mobile provision that is going to happen over the next 3 years in terms of increased levels of poor connectivity because of the new tech that's rolling out, we are going to continue to see this problem. So we're going to have to innovate and think about how we do things differently. That might involve satellite broadband, that might involve other terms and other ways of connecting, but the team are on it. GovRoam is something that we've recently rolled out as well, and that allows us, so any sort of site that isn't necessarily owned by us that has GovRoam in it, we will now be able to use that. Our staff will now be able to use that. So it's just, again, increasing connectivity as much as possible.
Very good, Maria.
Thank you, Chair. My question comes up on something that Bijou said. So we've gone from the digital to the people side of it. I hadn't been aware of all of that balancing of different ways of working. So as you say that, it strikes me that that's quite a unique and bespoke organizational memory within that team. And based on discussions in other settings, and SQ&I, for example, around the growing workload, the increasing referral rate, etc., there's a vulnerability around that team. Should any of them be off sick or we try to recruit in, how do we maintain that bespoke knowledge? Because it's not something that anybody can just slot into. And as you rightly say, it's not necessarily ideal to try to stamp it into a mold that doesn't work. And I don't think there's a solution to it in this room, but it just occurred to me that that's something to perhaps think about.
Hannah, do you have any reflections on that?
I'm just actually sat reflecting. It's not only between Northumbria and Newcastle, it's between North Tyneside and Northumberland in terms of local authorities and how we initiate care packages. So I think it's a much bigger issue actually, and people are always having to have that cognitive load of if that child is in that school and is that local authority, or if it's a Newcastle discharge. I think Newcastle's possibly an easier one through the alliance, the Tinsaparan work that's taken place. We can look to have that conversation. But I think this is a bigger issue than people perhaps appreciate.
Okay, but there is also the bit about collective knowledge. It's not just the complexities of variation, it's how we ensure that we don't lose that information. Is there any reflection on that?
I think just that it's not limited there, it's everywhere. So actually,
Marion?
It is in other places as well, because obviously we worked with Hexham with Cumbria, so there's a lot going on there as well. So it's just not in one area, is it? So
Jeremy?
Yeah. Well, it's just to reflect back on Sarah's point about Inside Out and how absolutely I think it's going to be, in order to get neighbourhood working. This is where I think we do need to have a focus. If only there was a IHO process that we can take part in.
Yeah. Okay. Save that for board development discussion. Thank you. That was really good, insightful in several measures. First of all, the reminder that community services is vital. It's complex. It's in some ways it's even more complex than the complexities we get within our acute settings, and important that we all ensure that our pattern of visits includes making sure we're aware of that. I think we've, as a board, had good assurance that where some issues have arisen, they've been responded to very quickly. Nice to hear from Dave, it was all ready to go anyhow, but let's either way, there's been a good rapid response, and I'm relieved about that, and that increased recognition of how complicated it is with different boundaries and different practices. That's a good report. Let's go straight on now. Phil, you were at the antenatal department. Yeah.
I also put my microphone on. So firstly, I think thanks to Alistair for organising the visit. But most of the points that arose were really around kind of infrastructure, building related issues. So it's probably helpful just to remind people, or for those that haven't seen it before, it's kind of located at what I call the end of the hospital, as it were. You go past the main entrance, and then it's the last building of the hospital, and it's split in half between gynae outpatients and antenatal. We were going to go to gynae outpatients, but it was shut, so that was a difficult piece to see. So but anyway, so we focused on antenatal. I think a shout out to Suzanne, the midwife, who actually stayed with us, I think, for the whole of the visit. She's fantastic. She really was, and on top of everything. And the unit's fine. There's nothing, that stood out as to something that was wrong or anything that didn't kind of work properly. But the location's a bit difficult to find. The first sign you get is actually outside the building, which is it's daft because you've come in at the front of the hospital. And so what's happening is a lot of the patients still going through the main entrance, as the volunteers confirm. And the problem is you used to be able to access it going through the hospital, but you no longer can now. I don't know why, but it just means that then people have got to go back outside, and it's quite a walk, particularly with the nature of the patient sometimes, to get to the facility. So we could maybe have a look at those points. The overarching issue, however, was that the layout of the unit, and I suspect it hasn't changed since the hospital was built, doesn't quite work in a number of ways. There aren't areas for sort of confidential discussions quite easily and so forth. And one example that we do need to have a look and think about. So they've got 5 new scanners arriving, which I think the charity got for them, which is fantastic. But the rooms they're going into are not really big enough for it to work effectively. So I think it's at the stage where it just needs to have a look at in terms of, I don't think you need a bigger facility. It just needs to be organised in a better way. So I do think it would be helpful to put that onto our potential capital works, just to have a look at that. It might be the same with the gynae outpatients, but as I say, we didn't get a chance to look at that. There might be an opportunity to look at building utilisation, because if half of it's not open, then question mark about that as well.
Okay, that's a really clear highlight. I'll invite our maternity champion in just a moment to comment, but let's not try and solve it here. I think at board level, we need assurance that the issue's been raised and somebody will give it proper consideration. But with that steer, Margaret, anything you want to-
Just agree with Phil. I do think there is some work that needs to be done, reconfiguration for the women that are going in and using the service. And I'll go out there for another visit shortly.
Bijou, how can we best ask for somebody to have a look at this, and where should they
I
come?
think we'll take it out because we've got the capital group as well. So as part of that, we'll take it out offline from here.
Thank you for that. Anything more, Marion?
Yes, thank you. There's already a subgroup formed about it. We're looking at antenatal across the patch, but we're also looking at PAU. So Katie and the team have been working on space utilisation. There's an interim report that's coming to our board and surgery at the next board. So
good. Okay, so the process is in hand at least. Yes, Paul.
I just wanted to pick up the mention around car parking, the perennial problem of car parking.
Oh.
Clearly, the North Tyneside site's pretty landlocked in terms of ability to build more capacity, but there is a lot of work ongoing around car parking, usage, access to car parks, etc. And you heard from Claire earlier about active travel and things like that, car sharing. So there was a discussion at staff partnership board this week about car parking. Brian came from NHFM, so there is work underway to try and ease the pressure on the North Tyneside site.
I think what makes it particularly difficult for the antenatal unit is that they are multi-site, and it's fine if they go there first thing in the morning. It's when they've gone somewhere else and they're coming at lunchtime. It's really difficult for them to find anyone.
We have a lot of staff who live very close to the North Tyneside site who bring their cars into work.
Yeah, that's part of the
probably park there all day. So there's a lot of work going on to try and understand that.
Dave, and then I'm going to move something.
Yeah, just very quickly on the digital one, it's less of a positive update than last time. I think we are aware of the complexity of this, the maternity systems, and a lot of the systems that we've put in place are in response to safety elements, and that results in a disparate system in terms of a patient record. It's quite hard to unpick without spending big money on an EPR and integration, or items underway to try and make the data link up a little bit better to make the process a bit easier for the staff.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. I was amazed we managed to get through 3/4 of the Phil report without car parking featuring. So there we go. The day Phil moves onto a bike will be the day that we start to change our board agenda. That was really good. So, yeah. Okay, sorry, I shouldn't stir that up. Reece, sexual health. It's a frustration to me this because it's 2 years now they've been there, and when we quite rightly pulled them out of Shire Moor because they were inadequate, we were really sure that it would be less than a year, and it's really frustrating that they're still in the hospital. Yeah.
And I think the prospect is that it's not short term now, is it? Even though we're talking about a new space for them. Thanks to Hannah, because we had a lovely community trips out lately. I think I walked to North Tyneside, Phil, just for the record. It's an issue. So it is, they didn't want to be in the hospital. We knew that because they think it is very much a community service. It is not signposted as sexual health. It is signposted as Ward 9. And we did check whether that's what you get when you get an appointment. And it does say that. But it's this kind of slight cloak and dagger thing about sexual health that we talked about with the team. And I know, Ross, they're doing some work with comms about this, which is, it's not something to be ashamed of. It's a broad service. I don't know why we're all hiding about this, not calling it what it is or what the issue is. And so they're quite positive about it. And I think we probably need to.
Yeah, but some of the patients aren't.
Yeah,
and that's.
I understand that. But you're going to go in it. If it's Ward 9 or sexual health, you're still going in the place. You're still sitting in an open waiting room. I think I just find it a little bit uncomfortable about how we are branding. I think the big shock to both of us was quite the level of issues that they are dealing with in that unit. And I think I kind of was probably quite naive about it. We heard some really difficult cases, and the big concern, which why I raised it in the issue, was if they're doing out of hours, they've had some really difficult patients in where they've had to rely on security coming from the UTC. So we have had a conversation with them about whether they can co-locate out of core times, because they are a long way out of traffic. They are on their own, or maybe one of two of them working in a big space. And if you've got a difficult patient and it gets violent, as it had done, that could be really quite
risky for staff, and I didn't like that side of it. So we have talked about whether that's a prospect.
Is that new because they're on the North Tyneside site, or what is it, how do they manage that in Shire?
They had security at Shiremore.
Right.
They had specific security, and now obviously they have site security at North Tyneside, but it's not as close to them as it would have been in the previous situation. And I think it's just they've had a bad experience recently, and that's not good.
So a couple of things. We spoke with the team. They are looking at whether they could go and use the main outpatient facility, particularly in the evening when they're running on skeletal staff. So I think they were just looking at how they could move the equipment and what that would look like. And we also discussed the lone worker devices. And there's no reason why you couldn't have a lone worker device within the hospital if you're from others. So we're doing the evaluation on that. The only thing that wasn't in the report as well, which really struck me, was about patient expectations. So phone calls from people on holiday wanting medication to be sent across to them. So I think that's a real challenge. That was one example, but there were several that they're experiencing in today's world.
Well, I think I've mentioned the fact that they've got a big call, and it's an interesting public health question, wasn't it? Is that there's quite a push to do doxypep, which is an antibiotic. So there's a push to say, take this antibiotic because then you're less at risk of sexually transmitted diseases, but they don't then promote the safe sex angle of that, and we're making people antibiotic resistant. So there's a real question about how that all joins up that I found really difficult to hear, to be honest.
Okay, well, again, let's not resolve that. What I love about these discussions is they highlight a very specific issue, and part of that is awareness for us, just to recognise the issue, and part of this is to be assured that things are happening and those discussions are taking place.
Yeah, we probably just need to pick up the funding if it did sit from a security point of view.
Can't go to the loo yet, but we're about to talk about funding.
If it was sitting with Sharon where that funding is, we need to make sure.
That up with Dana. It's quite a constrained contract because it's local authority commission and they have largely block funding, but we'll pick that up with Dana.
We're not going to talk about finance for 5 minutes, Paul.
Just to say as well, I have seen a business case from NHSN dated April 26 around future options for.
We know that we're looking
so
locations.
They're on the case. It's just frustrating state. So
You just need to make sure no funding's been pulled off the contract on the back of it, because when they move off site, we'll need to be able to put that back in
I
again.
don't think it'll have been taken out of the contract because it is a block contract. So
okay. Last one, special care baby unit, Maria.
What a fantastic visit. Thank you, Chair. Thank you to Marion for taking me on a visit to an area that I wouldn't normally go in a non-work environment. And this was on the back of significant concerns that had been coming through Safety, Quality and Improvement Committee around issues within that team, around culture and safety. And this was deemed to be important enough that I asked to squeeze the report into this board. Thanks to COSET team for squeezing it in at the last minute, because I managed to get the visit in, and it provides significant reassurance. It was a very warm and welcoming atmosphere, and it was clear that the people who were there wanted to be spoken to, wanted to be seen, wanted to describe what they've been doing. And huge thank you to Jill, the Deputy Ward Manager, Jane, the Head of Nursing for Child Health, and Catherine, the matron, who's only been in post for about 4 months, and who came in, she said on her day off, just to meet with me. But actually, I think it was the beginning of her annual leave. So even more so, the effort that she had made to come in and be there to show off the area. And the changes that have been made in the space of time that it's been under the review of safety, quality and improvement is dramatic. I mean, there's changes around safety and equipment. So they've filled equipment gaps by purchasing things that really are mandatory to have on a unit such as theirs, ECG and the blood gas analyzer, which is necessary for when you're monitoring patients who have oxygen requirements to see what their progress or deterioration might be. Safety, as a culture of safety and partnership working is being embedded. So there are now regular safety huddles every day and multidisciplinary team meetings every day. And just for clarity, the unit is nurse practitioner led. So they are advanced neonatal nurse practitioners with medical support. So nurse practitioner led with medical support from pediatric consultant with a special interest in neonatology. It sounds from the description of what's been going on that things have been improving steadily and still with plans to improve. We were joined by Katie Lissaman to demonstrate in reality how the partnership working between the prenatal and the postnatal side of things is really being built up, so that collaborative working across the life path for these babies is demonstrable. The other elements are around staff, which I can't underestimate the leaps and bounds that they've taken in terms of supporting the staff, the training and development of the staff. I spoke to Claire, who came off, who has joined the team out of a program where they do shadow shifts to get a taster. And she was brimming over with the excitement about working there. You know, she couldn't stop smiling, describing coming from an adult background to this very opposite end of the life course, you know, in terms of age. And she was just so happy to be there and felt truly supported. There's lots of training opportunities, different ways of working, so that the model of the shift patterns has changed to allow a better patient to nurse practitioner ratio, which enhances the safety of the unit. And certainly the partnership working piece is very clear around the different teams within the hospital and outward facing as well. I can't emphasize the change that the new leadership has made on the team. That came through from everybody speaking to me, and certainly the compassionate and distributive leadership that is now embedded and expected can only do wonders in terms of developing the team. So the team feel that they are given the opportunities to learn and grow, and that is part of what Northumbria is growing their own. So this visit really provided a lot of assurance. There are things that can be improved on. I'll just highlight the reduction, the halving of funding to the maternal neonatal voices partnership work, which we've talked a lot in this meeting today about, you know, outward or bottom up or whatever in terms of our patients. We can't lose that maternal and neonatal voices when we're talking about designing services to suit our population. I'll stop there.
Well, blimey, I'm thinking it's only a few months ago that as Chair of Safety and Quality, you escalated very significant concerns to the board. And so hearing that you're feeling well assured on the progress on it is really good to hear. Can I just hear briefly from the maternity champion, from Margaret, before I open it up for any other comments? I'm not intending to go into, there's 8 action points that Maria's got, which are operational ones, and I'm not intending for us to take comments on them, but Margaret?
I agree on most of it, Maria. I think it has made a dramatic improvement. I think Catherine has made a significant change in the culture. I think there's still things to do, and we are doing it, because I was there just 2 weeks before that. So it is positive. They didn't do so well in the 15 steps, did they? So that's a piece of work, and they are addressing that. So yeah, on the right trajectory, but things that still need to occur. But I think one of the queries is Catherine's role is on a fixed term, isn't it? It's not permanent. And I wondered where we are with, because she has absolutely made such a difference. And our relationship with the medical staff as well is excellent.
Marion?
We'll just review that. She's on a fixed term till September. We'll probably extend it just a bit more.
Yeah.
And I would agree with both ladies. I think there has been a huge improvement, but there is still work to be done, and we will continue to do that. The action points are all in hand that Maria has made, but I think the culture is so much better. I think when we saw the 15 steps in March, it was not welcoming. It took a long time for people to come out, and that has dramatically changed. And that's not just on the day that you were there.
Okay, Jeremy.
It's just to say that one of the actions when we discussed it at S&Q was to talk to the Royal College of Paediatrics. And we just about have agreed the timetable for them to come in and have a review of the unit, which will be September, October.
Good. Okay. Well, that's great. Really encouraging with provisos, of course. But for a spell, it's been one of the flashing lights for us, and it sounds like the light isn't flashing quite so brightly at the moment, and real progress. So let's acknowledge the progress together. Thank you very much indeed. Let's move on now from that. And here we've got CQC Regulation 17, the stakeholder engagement. You kind of touched quite a bit on this in your comms report earlier on. Anything you want to add to that, Ross?
No, I'll be very brief, Chair, but this just describes the work we do as a trust to ensure that we're seeking and acting on that feedback in line with all the regulations. The work's split between my team and Joe's team, and happy to say we're fully compliant.
Good. Okay. Any comments or reflections? Steve?
Just wanted to point out something that I thought was really promising. Every month we get a patient safety dashboard from Paula, just safety quality improvement. And like all dashboards, it's a bit like the one we've got in front of us there, you know, it can be quite busy, but she's deliberately added an extra page, which is about learning from and learning themes. So this is complaints, duty of candour, and other such feedback mechanisms. And in the last meeting, she's trialled a new structure for that, which is grouping the learning under the themes, the CQC themes. And I think that's really helping to provide some clarity over what different kinds of feedback mechanisms. Sometimes they talk to the same overarching thematic area, and it helps us to really prove that we're learning from them in a wider lens.
Good, that's really helpful. Yeah. Then I think we're ready to receive that report. We don't need to approve it, do we? No, we're receiving that report. Good, thank you. We're into the section which, if you're an observer, it can feel the most frustrating because there's a lot of data, a lot of complicated papers, all of which have been chewed over elsewhere, and here to us now for escalation. In other words, if there are any highlight issues that the board needs to be fully aware of, I will in each case invite the committee chair, which will normally be Maria, to identify if there's any issues brought up, or but otherwise we'll be taking it a lot as read. So the first one, nursing and midwifery. Marion, any bits you want to highlight?
Just a couple of points. Obviously, it was through SQI last week. I just wanted to say about the staff moves. This has been something we've really been looking at over the last 2 or 3 years. Delighted to say that they have come down. They're 242 this month. I just wanted to highlight that April of last year was 371.
Yeah, that's significant.
It shows you that, you know, because April for us across the whole of the trust was really quite tricky. So well done to the teams for that. And then just to say that the work is ongoing about recruitment, and that's really helped us, and I think that's really helped. We're working very closely with HR and the teams there. And then finally, International Nurses Day, which I couldn't not mention.
Of course.
Well done to the teams.
Thank you. Maria, anything you want to highlight from us tonight? Any other highlights from anybody else, Maria? Margaret?
Just the health support workers vacancies. It's gone up and it's quite substantial, really.
It has, and we're doing a lot of work on that, Margaret, as you know. But just to see where we sit with them all and looking at some of the roles and responsibilities, a lot of them as well, they are quite keen to go down the nursing route. So we're just doing a bit of work in the background, but yes, acknowledging that.
Okay, happy to receive. Allied health professionals?
Yes, probably just the same again. A lot of work in progress. I will look to Margaret because she's already very keen about the HPs and about the recruitment. There are a lot of focused work, particularly on radiography staff that we're looking at. You can see that that's just changed a wee bit, but the team are all over it. There's also an HP, which I'm delighted on, and I probably should have mentioned when Claire was here. We've appointed an HP in clinical sustainability, because it's not just about nursing, it's about HPs and everybody. So that was really good. And also we've had one of our practice development posts agreed, which is good. So we'll just keep an eye on that. It's only for a short time, but again, that's something that we haven't had before.
Great. Margaret?
Just to add, which was excellent, our first dietetics apprentice completed. That is really good. I'm really pleased, and obviously we'll have further in the future, but that that is great. And Sarah and the team are really looking at all of the ranges and roles in EHP and looking at the apprenticeship agenda.
I'm loving hearing about the expansion of the apprentices. I think it's
Oh, it's great. It's great.
good, good, good. There's the dashboard, monthly safety quality dashboard. Chris?
Yeah, thank you. So thank you, Steve, for the comments before about the theming of the learning. I'll pass that back to Paul and the team because, you know, we're just trying to improve that month on month, just to be more as useful as we can for colleagues across the trust. The other thing just to pull out, Chair, is we did have a successful, I hope, looking at Jane here, engagement meeting on the 11th of May with Jane and a couple of her colleagues. So we've got them in the diary and planned going forward, and that will also involve some visits to departments and wards and areas, linking in with CQC colleagues of which areas they would like to go and see.
Good. Thanks very much. I won't invite you to comment, Jane, otherwise it confuses the role of us as governors. Governments. Yeah. Delighted to hear that. Any comments or questions to Chris on that? From Maria?
No, just to say that the last page of the addition to the dashboard really has made things clearer. So just to reiterate Steve's point, that and I'd spoken to Paul about this after the last meeting, because it does really pull out the lessons learned, which is what the whole point of the dashboard is.
Absolutely so. Absolutely so. I warmly welcome that. Good. Next up, the maternity report, Marion.
Yes, so just really the tiered maternity model, which I'll bring back later on in the year. We've started obviously that at the beginning of April and just working through that. And then the other bit is the independent national maternity investigation, the interim report. These are the key emerging themes that we've really focused on. So there's working groups for each of them, and we're just going through all the evidence just now. We know that Baroness Amos will present probably next month sometime, but we are already ahead of the game with the team, with Margaret, with Katie, and obviously with Special Care Baby Unit to make sure that we're addressing these issues.
So when the Amos report comes out, we'll doubtless be looking at it at board level as well as at and possibly elsewhere.
It's June.
June. Yeah, but whether we take the report, I'm minded to say at board we want to take the report when there's already been some work done internally to say how we need to respond to it. So whether we'll see it at
we won't see it.
Yeah. There's a large action plan.
Good. Questions or comments? There's a load of information here, and again, it's been chewed over. So, from the maternity champion point of view, nothing you need to highlight.
No, I mean, good to see MOS and no signals for the last 12 months.
MOS being a new kind of data system.
Yeah, and the maternity, what's it called?
Yeah,
signal system. Yeah,
something. Yeah.
So yeah, lot of positive work going there. Really positive.
Maria, anything to add?
Just to say that we had assurance at SQNI that there is unlikely to be anything that hasn't already been captured in the work already done with any changes that come.
Okay, well that's nice to be sufficiently on the inside for that. As a board, we will want to be able to get proper assurance on that once the report is published. Yeah, very good. Then we're into learning from death, Jeremy.
Yeah, so just to say that the interesting data is in the SQI report rather than in this, so it's quite a dry read. Happy to take any questions. I just wanted to say that Elliot's announcement has caused us to reflect on some of our succession plans within the senior medical leadership, and so I'm planning to make, as part of all of the moving around that we're going to do with that, some strengthening of the mortality governance arrangements and supporting safety directorate space.
Thank you. Once again, I'm sorry, Maria, keep looking to you for any comments,
unless we get
summarise anything extra from safety and quality.
No, it sounds like a very appropriate move to make.
I'm going to give you an associate medical.
Oh, that'll be nice, won't it? Yeah.
Yes, that'll be helpful.
Great.
Just worth saying, and I know Jeremy's talked about this SQ&I, and it's in the report as well, just around the impact of the way the national counting of SHIMI sits. So you'll have seen that our shimmy, while still within expected range, the actual number has increased. We still sit in the same banding when we look at the NOF score, but it's just to be mindful that it does have the way that SDEC activity is counted has an impact. We have flagged that nationally on numerous occasions. We're still waiting for formal guidance, instruction to change how we count SDEC activity. When we do finally get that, it will still take another 12 months to play out of our numbers. So we just really need to be really mindful of that, because any slight deviation for us could potentially have a negative impact when it's actually based on activity rather than a mortality issue.
And to be fair to us, we went through this in very significant detail aboard to look at the data and our understanding of it, and we were able to assure ourselves that any changes in apparent trend in the data were not changes in outcomes of patients.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's a 19% decrease in the number of patients that contribute to the shimmy cohorts. And out of the 7 regional trusts, we're one of 4 that have made that change. Not all units have made that change.
But all 4 of those trusts that have made the change are seeing a similar shift in their shimmy position.
Because we follow the national guidance so much around SDEC, we are the largest chair.
And it's one of the frustrations for me. I think that we're ending up having discussions about the quality of the data rather than what it tells us.
One number divided by
any. Apart from that point about the continued frustrations on the data, any other comments from the board on the mortality? Then we're into corporate safety and quality, and my agenda says Bijou, but I think it's Chris that normally leads on this one.
Yeah, caught them off guard there.
We can't delegate it, Chris.
Sorry, I just.
Were you waiting for Bijou to do it? Carl?
Would like me
No, I was just
for me to do it.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, if you'd like to, Phil, I can do it now.
Get on with it.
Yeah, so basically, it's links back to the first agenda item of the CEO dashboard, where we have a good set of numbers in terms of performance, but we have some worry areas that we described before, certainly around RTP performance, up to 18 weeks and our PTL size. I think that's the most things I would like to pull out. It would just mention shimmy in there as well. Anything else there, Phil?
Phil, as Chair of Finance and Performance.
Yeah, obviously went through the more detail of this earlier in the week. I mentioned before that we focus quite a lot on the elective care piece around RCT and so forth, but I thought it was also important just to recognise the continuing significant improvement in performance on the ambulance handovers, which, whilst not formally raised by the governors last night, informally, it formed a significant part of discussion around that it was much, much better. And all credit down to
you. Yeah. Very good. Any other points arising in addition to all the detailed stuff that happened in finance and performance? Good. And we've got the corporate finance one.
Thank you. So this is the month 1 financial performance delivered in line with plan for month 1. Clearly, it's very early in the year. We had some detailed discussion at the committee on Monday regarding the results. At this stage, we're confident that we'll deliver all financial targets for this year.
Good. Phil?
Yeah, no, hunky-dory on finance really. I think we're going to have a bit of a push on the SIP programme because at the moment we've got sort of one variance being offset against another and so forth. But broadly speaking, we're in pretty good shape.
Questions or comments? Again, it's very early in the year. We had a lot of discussion elsewhere. All good. Thank you. We're into the wrap-up stuff. Agenda for the next meeting. Looks right to me. Anybody got significant additions? And how's the meeting gone? Have you had the meeting? Okay. I haven't received notice of any questions from the public, so we're good to stop. And we've got half an hour break.